Hi and welcome back to my channel. So today I want to do a wrap up of all the books that I read in January, and I managed to read 11 books, and that's a lot more than I usually manage. And it's because I signed up for a 2-week free trial of an audiobook service here in Europe called Nextory. And during those 2 weeks, I just went crazy and read and listened to as much as I could. So I listened to 9 books, I think, and then I read two books. So yeah, we have a lot to go through. So I will just start talking about the books. And this time, I think I will start with the books I enjoyed the least, and then work my way through until the end, when I will talk about my favorite books of the month. So first up is The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas, and I'm sure most of you have seen this book around on BookTok and BookTube. It's extremely popular, and yeah, I was curious to know what the hype was all about. And although I'm not usually someone who reads romance, but I do want to find some romance that I do like, so I'm willing to give some romances a try. And this one turned out to be not for me. I can't really understand the hype about this book. And for those of you who don't know, this is a romance. It has the trope of fake dating. Yeah, I'm sure if you're into this type of romance, it's a fine book. But for someone who comes sort of from the outside, I can't really see why people love it so much. But yeah, so yeah, I think this was probably the book that I enjoyed the least this month. Next up is another romance, and this time it's a Christmas romance. So this is The Christmas Pact by V. Keeland and Penelope Ward. And this was a book that was free on Amazon, so I'm judging this one less harshly. And to me, this is just like all the other popular romance books on BookTube and BookTok. It's very shallow and superficial, I think. So I think instead of buying those books, you can just listen to this one for free. This one has the trope of sort of enemies to lovers, also some fake dating in there, and yeah, but it's set during Christmas. And I do think that if you are looking for when Christmas comes around again, and you're looking for a short, sweet romance, then this one could actually be a good option, because it's free on Amazon and it's quite short, so it's more to the point than some of the other popular romance books, which are quite long, unnecessarily so, I think. So yeah, if you're looking for that specific thing, then this might be for you. Otherwise, it's not a great reading experience. Next up is The End of Getting Lost by Robin Kerman. And I had never heard about this book before I saw it in the Nextory app. And I just thought that the synopsis sounded very intriguing. And the story is basically about a married couple from the US who are traveling throughout Europe. And they both have secrets which are sort of showing up during their travels. And we are getting flashbacks of their past life in the US and what has brought them to the point where they are now. And this sounded very interesting, and I think that the concept and the ideas of the book are very interesting, but it's just not very well executed. I don't think that the characters are very well developed. Yeah, there's a lot of room for improvement in this story, I feel like. And they are actually going to make a TV series of this book, which I think is quite a good idea. I think that the TV series could work a lot better than the book. And I think that the main character, the like the husband in the couple, is going to be played by the main character or main actor from Normal People, Paul Mescal. So I think that could be interesting. So I'm definitely going to look out for that and probably watch it when it comes out. Next up is The Dante Club by Matthew Pearl, and this is about a group of people in the 1800s in Boston in the US who are translating and like publishing an English version of the Divine Comedy by Dante. And as they are doing this, people are being murdered in the area, like via methods that are inspired by the way that people were tortured in the 7 Rings of Hell in Dante's book. So it becomes sort of a murder mystery which sort of marries with the themes of Dante's book. And when I read like the synopsis, I thought it sounded very, very interesting. It sounded sort of like dark academia, which I like. But in the end, that's not really what it was. And the plot was very like all over the place. The characters were, I don't know, so underdeveloped. I could not like tell one character from another. There was no connection to the characters. So in the end, it felt more like a bad crime novel, I would say, which is a shame because, like I said, I was very excited to read it. I read the Divine Comedy in school, so I know the themes, and I thought it could be super interesting. So again, a good concept, but not very well executed, unfortunately. Okay, so we are now getting into the books that I actually enjoyed this month, and first up is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. And this is a classic gothic novel, and I can really see why. It's just a great book. It's dark and mysterious, exactly like you want a gothic book to be. And yeah, it's a classic for a reason, and I think for anyone who's looking like for a classic to read, I think like this is a great choice. And I guess that most people know the story of this book, but basically it's about a lawyer in London in the 1800s, and he's sort of investigating the strange like connection between his old friend Dr. Jekyll and this like murderous criminal Mr. Hyde. So yeah, I highly recommend this book. Next up is Explosive 18 by Janet Evanovich, and this is book 18 in the Stephanie Plum series, and I have talked a lot about that series on this channel because I really like it. So I will be quick, but yeah, the books are basically about Stephanie Plum, who is a bounty hunter in Trenton, New Jersey, and she is very bad at her job. Crazy things are always happening to her and around her, and the people around her are also a bit crazy and very flamboyant. So these books have a lot of humor, and yeah, the crime element is perhaps not the main focus of these books. There's also like a love triangle in the background, but it's also not too serious. It's got a lot of humor too. So yeah, I love these books. If you want like a fun chick lit crime book, then this is what you're looking for. Now on to something less fun. It is Misery by Stephen King. And as I understand it, this is one of Stephen King's like most popular books, and I can see why. I also enjoyed it a lot, and it has a movie with Kathy Bates in it, which I haven't seen, but maybe I will in the future. But this book is about Paul, who is a middle-aged writer, and he gets in a car crash and is found by one of his biggest fans. who also, it turns out, is crazy. So instead of bringing him to the hospital, she brings him to her house, and she used to work as a nurse, so she can take care of him herself. And so while she is like taking care of him, she wants him to write a new book. So Paul is famous for writing a series of novels which are very popular but not highly criticized. And so he got tired of writing those books, so he killed off the main character. So now the woman who, the nurse who found him and brought him home, she is a big fan of this series and is very pissed off that he killed off the main character who she loves. So she wants him to bring back the main character in the book, bring her back to life in a realistic way, and then write another book featuring this main character. And yeah, so like I said, this nurse is crazy, so it's not a pleasant experience for Paul to be there. So while he has to write this new book in a way that pleases her, he's also trying to escape, basically. And this is, I guess, a horror thriller book, and it's really super intense, which is why I really like it. And like the process of him writing the book is very interesting. The process of him trying to escape is very interesting. And he also finds out like the nurse's history, which is also very interesting. And it's all quite like dark and scary. He's isolated in her house, and he doesn't really know like how far she can go. He just knows that she can go far. And things are happening, and yeah, it's very intense, and I really enjoyed this book. So if you're looking for something horror thriller-esque, then this is definitely a good option. So next up is The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. And this book has actually also been adapted into a movie with Emma Watson. And this story is about Charlie, who is a kid, and he is writing letters to someone we don't really know who it is. But throughout his like childhood and youth, he's writing letters to this person, and he's talking about like life in general in these letters. So about his family, about school, about friends, about love, about substance abuse later as he gets older. And I think that I enjoyed this book like less than I would have if I had read it earlier. I think that I'm too old. I do think that it's a good book, but I'm over 30 now, so reading about teenagers, I just don't find that interesting. But I do think that if you are in the right age, so like in high school, that you would enjoy this book quite a lot. There are also things that the main character Charlie does that makes me not like him at all. And I do get the feeling that it's a book where you are supposed to like and root for the main character, and I just couldn't. So maybe that also impacted my opinion of this book. But yeah, like basically I do think that it's a well-written book. Next up is a book that I enjoyed very much, and it is I Am Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. And this is another book that has been all over the internet, and it's very like easy to see why. First of all, it's a great book. I really enjoyed reading it. And second of all, it's a memoir written by a former child actor, child star. And she is talking about how it is to be a child star and to grow up in Hollywood. It's also a lot about her relationship to her mom, which was very unhealthy. So the mom dreamed about being an actress, and she never became one. So she has transferred this dream onto Jennette, who is never very interested in being an actress. But to please her mom, she does her best, and she becomes a child star, basically. And yes, and like their relationship, like as Jeanette gets older, gets, I would say, more and more toxic, or maybe not toxic, but unhealthy. I think that the mom is like influencing Jeanette in a very negative way, and she's transferring her problems, like her eating disorder, for example, onto Jeanette. So, and like they don't come from a family with a lot of money, so Jeanette also becomes sort of like the main provider of the family. So there is just so much pressure on her. And yeah, so this book for me like confirmed the prejudice that I had against like being a child star, about growing up in Hollywood. I think that sort of the negative aspects that you think about really are like confirmed in this book. And I feel like this book is very honest, it's very real. I don't think she's hiding very much. She speaks about a lot of very difficult like subjects, and I really felt like I had learned something when I read this book. And yeah, I really recommend this book. You should perhaps look up like trigger warnings before, if you are sensitive, because some topics that are difficult are being talked about in this book. Next up is another book that I enjoyed very much, but it does have a long title, so I have to read it. It is called Mindhunter: Inside the FBI's Elite Serial Crime Unit by John E. Douglas and Mark Olshaker. So this is the book that the Netflix series Mindhunter is based on. And it is written by the guy who sort of developed and created the like profiling unit within FBI. So it talks about how they developed the methods for like using profiling as a way of solving crimes and catching serial killers. And the main focus in the book is very much on serial killers, and serial killers who hunt women, basically, I would say. So if like violence and sexual violence and violence against women is something you don't want to read about, then absolutely do not read this book. It is a lot of violence against women in this book. This is something that I was prepared for, and I watch a lot of like crime documentaries. I knew about a lot of cases in this book, so I was very prepared for it. But if you're not, and then it's almost like someone like coming from all sides, just like hitting you with all these stories about horrific violence and sexual violence against women. So just know that going in, that you have to be prepared for that, because it gets very dark. It's basically his whole career in the FBI, and like during I don't know how many, like maybe 40 years. Of course, he has seen so much violence that there is a lot to talk about, but when it gets condensed into a few hours of reading, then it can be very overwhelming. But I think that the book itself was very well written. He like interferes like with his own life, which sort of makes you like come up to the surface to get some air before getting like back down into the darkness again. So I do think that, like, if you are interested in crime and true crime and that kind of stuff and how the police are working, then this is a great book. I really enjoyed it. So last but not least is A Wild Sheep Chase by Haruki Murakami, and this was my favorite book of January. I have said before on this channel that I love Murakami, and this book is no exception. This is one of his earlier books, and it's got magical realism, and it's got like the Murakami vibe very strongly, and I enjoyed this book so much. It's basically about a very like normal man in Tokyo, and through his work he gets like in contact with a man who wants him to find a very specific sheep. So he and his girlfriend goes on a quest to find this sheep, basically. and yeah, magical weird things are happening, and yeah, I just love it. It's such a great book. It's, yeah, like it's from 1982, I believe, and it's just like escaping to another world that's so similar to ours, but just, I don't know, enhanced in some sort of way. So this is my favorite book of January, and I am going to keep reading more Murakami. I do have some on my shelf, and yeah, that's it for this January wrap-up. And I want to say thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video.